She had always loved the piano. Ever since she could remember, the sound of the keys had been a comfort and a joy. Her fingers knew every note, every rhythm, as if they had a mind of their own. But even with all her talent, she was quiet about it. She never boasted or drew attention to herself. Music was her world, and she wanted to keep it that way. The school was buzzing with excitement that week. A big recital was coming, and everyone would be there, from students to parents, even a few local musicians who often came to see new talent. She had practiced for weeks, preparing for a piece that was known for being difficult. Every day after school, she sat at the piano in the music room, playing until her fingers ached, until the notes were perfect, until the piece felt like part of her. She was ready, or so she thought. But not everyone wanted her to succeed. Some of the other students were jealous. They whispered to each other, exchanging glances whenever she walked by. She didn't notice at first. She had her head buried in music, focused on the sound and the rhythm. But small things began to happen. A page from her sheet music would go missing. A bench would be moved. The room would suddenly be empty when she arrived to practice. She brushed it off, thinking she was imagining things. On the morning of the recital, her stomach twisted with nervousness. She woke up early, her heart beating faster than usual. She dressed carefully, making sure she looked neat. She checked her music bag several times, making sure nothing was missing. As she left the house, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. Today was the day she would perform in front of everyone. Today was the day they would all hear what she could do. When she arrived at the school auditorium, it was already full of people. Chairs were set in rows, and students chatted nervously among themselves. She saw some of the students who had been unfriendly to her, standing together and smirking. She didn't understand why they acted that way. She had never done anything to them. Still, she kept walking, her head down, trying not to show how nervous she felt. The music teacher, who had always encouraged her, came over with a kind smile. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. She nodded, but her throat felt tight. "I think so," she said, trying to sound confident. "Remember, just focus on the music. Let it guide you. Don't think about anything else," the teacher said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. She carried her music bag to the stage, each step feeling heavier than the last. She placed her bag down and sat on the piano bench. The keys gleamed under the lights, and for a moment, she felt the familiar warmth of comfort. She took a deep breath and opened her sheet music. But then she froze. Some of the pages were missing. Her heart sank. She looked around, panic rising in her chest. Could this be a mistake? Or had someone done this on purpose? She glanced toward the students who had been acting strangely. They were watching her with barely concealed smiles. The room seemed to shrink around her. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her music. She felt a wave of embarrassment and fear. What if she couldn't play without the full music? What if everyone laughed? What if all her hard work had been wasted? But then she closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the hours she had spent practicing, the mornings and evenings alone at the piano, the sound of the notes flowing under her fingers. She remembered how the music had always made her feel strong and alive. She realized that the music was inside her, not just on the pages. She could play the piece from memory. She could do this. The applause started as the previous student finished. It was her turn. She took a deep breath and let her fingers touch the keys. The first notes were quiet, tentative, but they were correct. She could hear the sound, soft at first, filling the room. Her hands moved more confidently with each measure, and she began to feel the music in her bones. It was as if the piano itself was helping her, guiding her through the tricky parts, reminding her that she knew every note. The students who had been smirking earlier began to shift in their seats. The whispers stopped. The room became still, listening to the sound she made. Her heart was still racing, but now with excitement, not fear. She let herself get lost in the music. Each note was a step forward, a small victory over the doubt and humiliation that had been planned for her. For a few moments, she forgot where she was. She forgot the missing pages, the whispers, the smirks. There was only the piano and the music. Her fingers danced over the keys, moving with precision and feeling, telling a story that only she could tell. The room was filled with the melody, strong and clear, and she felt herself growing taller, braver, more alive with each chord. She noticed the teacher watching, smiling proudly. That small gesture gave her even more courage. She leaned into the piece, letting her emotions pour into the music. She was no longer just playing. She was speaking without words, telling everyone in the room that she was not to be underestimated. The audience remained silent, captivated by the music. No one moved, no one whispered. She could feel the tension in the room, the anticipation, the awe. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't care. This was her moment. She was showing the world what she could do, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever doubted her or tried to make her feel small. As the final notes echoed through the auditorium, she held them, letting them linger in the air. She lifted her hands from the keys and waited, heart racing, for the reaction. The silence was almost unbearable. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, soft at first, then louder, filling the room. People were clapping, some standing, some with wide eyes, some shaking their heads in disbelief. She had done it. She had played perfectly, without the missing pages, without faltering, and she had silenced everyone who thought they could embarrass her. Her cheeks burned, not from shame, but from pride and relief. She took a small bow, trying to smile through the tears that had started to form. She felt her chest swell with accomplishment. She had faced fear and humiliation and had come out stronger. The music had not just been notes on a page. It had been her courage, her determination, her voice. As she walked off the stage, she noticed some of the students who had tried to humiliate her looking away, embarrassed themselves now. She didn't gloat, didn't speak a word. She just kept walking, head held high, letting the music speak for her. Backstage, the teacher hugged her. "You were amazing," she whispered. "You let the music win, and it did." She nodded, still catching her breath. "I guess the music was stronger than fear," she said softly. And in that moment, she realized something important. Talent and hard work mattered, but so did courage. Courage to face humiliation, to face doubt, to keep going even when everything seemed against her. She had found that courage in the music, and it would stay with her forever. She knew that no one could take it away, no matter how hard they tried. After the recital, she could hardly sleep that night. The memory of the audience's faces, the sound of the piano echoing in the hall, and the warmth of applause filled her mind. She kept replaying every note, every hand movement, every small hesitation. She was proud, yes, but the nervous feeling remained. She had faced humiliation before, or at least the threat of it, and she wanted to understand why some people tried to make her feel small. The next morning at school, she walked into the music room with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Some of the students who had tried to humiliate her avoided her gaze, but others whispered behind her back. She felt a sting of irritation but pushed it aside. Her love for music was stronger than their words. She sat at the piano, and for a moment, everything else faded. The keys were her refuge. She could lose herself in the sound and forget the petty jealousy around her. During the day, her teacher called her aside. "You did more than just play," the teacher said softly. "You showed courage. That is something no one can take away." She smiled faintly. "I just tried to play like I always do," she said, but she felt a warm glow inside. It wasn't just about playing notes. It was about standing up for herself in her own quiet way. After class, she noticed a group of students gathered near the lockers, looking at her as if they wanted to say something but didn't know how. She kept walking, keeping her head down but feeling every eye on her. She wondered why some people needed to bring others down to feel better about themselves. It confused her, but she refused to let it affect her. Music was stronger than gossip, stronger than fear, stronger than envy. Later that week, another challenge came. A local music contest was announced, and it was a bigger stage than the school recital. The prize was small, but the recognition was valuable. Her classmates whispered that she shouldn't even try, that she would make a fool of herself if she failed. She felt a twinge of fear, but she also felt a spark of determination. She had already proven she could face a room full of doubt and still play beautifully. This was another chance to show herself what she could do. Her teacher encouraged her. "You have a gift," the teacher said. "Don't let anyone make you doubt it. Practice, yes, but remember to believe in yourself." She nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. She spent hours every afternoon at the piano, practicing the new piece for the contest. The notes were complicated, demanding more than she had ever played before, but she embraced the challenge. Her fingers learned the rhythms, the melodies, the delicate transitions between soft and loud. She would play, and she would play well, not to prove anything to others, but to prove to herself that she could. Days passed quickly, filled with practice and small moments of doubt. Each time she felt the fear creeping in, she reminded herself of the recital, of the applause, of the feeling that she could conquer a room with music alone. That memory became her shield, protecting her from the sting of whispered words and secret smirks. On the morning of the contest, she woke up early, as she always did before a performance. The sun was shining through her window, casting a golden light on the room. She dressed carefully, her hands shaking slightly as she tied her shoes and brushed her hair. She carried her bag with the sheet music, checking it again and again. Everything had to be perfect, but more importantly, her mind had to be clear. She had to trust herself. Arriving at the contest hall, she saw a much larger audience than before. The room buzzed with excitement, laughter, and chatter. Students from other schools were here, each with their own talent, their own story, and their own nerves. She could feel the energy of the room pressing against her, but she held her head high. This was her moment to shine again. Backstage, she waited while other students performed. She watched their hands on the piano, their expressions tense, their nerves obvious. It made her realize that everyone felt fear, no matter how talented they were. She could use that feeling. She could transform it into focus, into energy, into music. When her turn came, she walked to the stage, her steps steady but her heart racing. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the smooth surface under her fingers. She closed her eyes for a brief moment and imagined the music inside her, flowing from her mind through her hands into the piano and out into the audience. The lights were bright, the room was silent, and all eyes were on her. She could hear her own heartbeat, strong and steady, reminding her that she was ready. The first notes were cautious, but as she continued, her confidence grew. She remembered the recital, remembered how she had faced fear before, and used that memory to guide her through the complex passages. Every note was intentional, every chord filled with feeling. She let herself become one with the music, letting it speak the words she could not say. The audience listened, rapt, as she poured her heart into each measure. Halfway through the piece, a small mistake happened. A note was off, and she felt a surge of panic, but it was brief. She reminded herself that mistakes did not define her, that her talent, her preparation, and her courage were stronger than one small slip. She recovered quickly, continuing with more intensity and focus. The music seemed to lift her, carrying her through the remainder of the piece with grace and power. By the end, the audience was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. She held her hands above the keys, feeling the warmth of recognition wash over her. Some of the students who had whispered behind her back looked embarrassed. Some simply stared in awe. She felt a mix of relief, pride, and joy. She had done it again. She had faced doubt, fear, and the threat of humiliation, and she had transformed it into something beautiful. Walking off the stage, she felt a quiet satisfaction. The applause, the smiles, the nods of respect from other students. It all mattered, but what mattered most was how she felt. She had trusted herself, she had trusted her music, and she had been stronger than the fear. Later, while leaving the hall, she heard a few students muttering among themselves. Some tried to apologize for their past behavior, some tried to explain themselves. She listened politely but did not engage. She realized that her actions, her music, and her courage had spoken louder than any words ever could. She didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She had found her own strength. On the way home, she thought about the journey she had been on. From hours of practice in an empty room to standing on stage in front of dozens of people, she had learned more than music. She had learned resilience, the power of focus, and the importance of believing in herself. She had also learned that those who tried to bring her down often did so because they were afraid of their own limits. And that was something she could forgive, even if she never forgot. At home, she sat at her piano once more, not to practice for the next performance, not to prepare for a contest, but simply to play. She let her fingers wander over the keys, improvising, exploring, feeling the music in a way that had nothing to do with competitions or applause. It was pure and freeing. In that moment, she realized that music was not just a way to prove herself to others. It was a way to know herself, to express everything she felt, to find peace and joy in a world that often tried to challenge her. That night, as she closed the piano and prepared for bed, she felt a quiet pride. She had faced fear and doubt not once, but twice, and each time, she had risen above it. She had been set up to be humiliated, but she had transformed the situation with talent, courage, and focus. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. There were more challenges ahead, more stages, more audiences, and more moments of doubt, but she also knew she was ready for them. Because now, she trusted herself completely, and the music inside her would always guide her through. The morning of the next big performance, she woke up feeling the familiar rush of nerves. She had grown used to this feeling, but it never became easy. Her stomach twisted, her hands were cold, and her mind raced with thoughts of the audience, the stage, and the piano. Today's recital was not just another performance. It was an opportunity to challenge herself with a piece she had never tried in public before. It was harder, faster, more complicated, and it would demand everything she had learned. Yet, beneath the anxiety there was excitement. She loved music, and the piano had always been her safe place. Her way to express what she could not put into words. She dressed carefully, making sure she felt comfortable but also confident. Every detail mattered. The way her hair was tied, the shoes on her feet, even the way she held herself as she walked to school. Confidence, she had learned, was as much about appearance as it was about mindset. Her teacher had reminded her many times, "Walk in as if you belong there, because you do." When she arrived at the school auditorium, the place was already filled with people. Chairs were arranged neatly, the stage was set, and the piano gleamed under the bright lights. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She could hear the faint murmur of the crowd, laughter, and soft conversations. Students were sharing notes, parents were settling into their seats, and teachers were giving last-minute instructions. It was the usual chaos before a recital, but for her, it felt like a storm she needed to navigate. Backstage, she waited with other students, feeling the pressure building. She could hear the notes of a warm-up piece from the piano in the corner. A few students looked at her with curiosity, some with quiet admiration, but she could also sense the jealousy, the unspoken doubts. They had tried before to make her stumble, to embarrass her, and she remembered that sharply. Her heart clenched at the memory, but she reminded herself that she was no longer the same nervous girl who had feared humiliation. She had faced it and come through stronger. This time, she would focus solely on the music. When her turn came, she walked to the stage with measured steps, her heart pounding but her head held high. She approached the piano, the polished black surface reflecting the bright stage lights. She sat on the bench and positioned her hands over the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let her mind clear. She remembered the countless hours of practice, the silent evenings spent perfecting every note, the joy she felt when the music flowed naturally. That feeling grounded her. The first notes were cautious but precise. She felt the tension in the room as the audience listened carefully. Some students held their breath, some parents leaned forward, and a few teachers nodded with approval. The music began to take over her mind and body. Her fingers moved fluidly, finding the keys with an ease born of long practice. Every chord, every trill, every pause was deliberate. The piano seemed to respond to her thoughts, echoing her feelings in a way words never could. The audience was quiet, captivated. She could feel their attention, the way it focused on her every movement. The whispers and smirks from before were gone, replaced by silent anticipation. Her nerves transformed into energy, guiding her through the complex passages. The piece required technical skill, speed, and emotion, and she poured herself into it, letting her talent shine without fear. Each measure was a step forward, a declaration of her determination, her resilience, and her love for music. Halfway through, she noticed a small mistake. A note slipped, a rhythm faltered for an instant. Panic threatened to rise, but she steadied herself immediately. She had learned that mistakes were not failures but opportunities to prove strength. Her fingers corrected themselves, and she continued with even more focus. She could feel the music flowing through her, carrying her above the fear and doubt. The audience seemed to forget the world outside the notes and bars, lost in the melody that filled the hall. By the middle of the performance, she was completely immersed. The music became a part of her, and she moved naturally with it. Her body leaned with the rhythm, her eyes occasionally closed to feel the sound more deeply. She was telling a story, expressing emotions she could not speak aloud, connecting with everyone in the room through the language of the piano. Each chord resonated, each pause had meaning, and every trill reflected her skill and her passion. As she approached the final section, she felt a surge of energy. The piece demanded strength, precision, and expression all at once. Her hands moved quickly yet gracefully, her mind sharp, her heart steady. She could sense the audience leaning forward, some holding their breath in anticipation of the last notes. This was her moment to show what she was capable of, not to anyone else, but to herself. She would finish strong as she had always dreamed. The final chords echoed through the auditorium, lingering in the air like a warm embrace. She lifted her hands, feeling the silence settle over the room for a heartbeat before the applause erupted. It was thunderous, filling the hall with clapping, cheering, and whistles. She blinked, momentarily stunned, as the energy of the audience washed over her. Some students looked shocked, others awed, and even the ones who had once tried to humiliate her now had expressions of respect. She stood and bowed, trying to hide the tears forming in her eyes. The applause continued, growing louder as the audience recognized the courage, skill, and emotion she had shared. She had not only played the piece flawlessly, but she had also told a story, touched hearts, and proved to herself that she could overcome any obstacle. Her heart was full, her mind at peace, and her spirit uplifted. Walking off the stage, she felt a lightness she had never experienced before. Backstage, the teacher embraced her, eyes shining with pride. "You were incredible," the teacher whispered. "You played with heart, with courage, and with truth." She nodded, still catching her breath. "I felt the music inside me," she said softly. "It helped me through." The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations, smiles, and whispered praise. Some students approached her to apologize or compliment her, but she listened politely and moved on. She didn't need to respond. Her performance had spoken louder than any words could. She realized that talent, courage, and persistence mattered more than gossip, jealousy, or attempts to humiliate her. She had learned that lesson well. That evening at home, she sat once again at her piano. She did not play the recital piece but let her fingers explore freely, improvising, creating, and feeling the music as she wanted. It was her private moment of joy, the reminder that music was not just a tool for recognition but a language that belonged to her alone. She could express anything, say anything, and find peace through the piano. As she closed the piano for the night, she reflected on the journey she had been on. The fear, the doubt, the attempts to embarrass her, and the triumphs had all shaped her. She had faced challenges, but she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected to her music than ever before. She knew that there would be more performances, more audiences, and more moments of doubt, but she also knew she had the courage to face them. Music was her guide, and she would always follow it, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. The following week, the excitement and tension of the previous recital still lingered in her mind. She had performed beautifully, but she knew there was always another stage, another audience, and another challenge waiting. That thought both thrilled and terrified her. Music had always been a journey, and each performance was a step into the unknown. She loved it and feared it at the same time. School felt different now. Some students avoided her gaze, embarrassed by their earlier behavior, while others were quietly curious, wanting to see what she would do next. She noticed the whispers and sideways glances, but she chose to ignore them. They could think what they wanted. She had learned that people's words and actions could not define her talent or her self-worth. Her teacher approached her one afternoon, a bright smile on her face. "There is a community concert coming," she said. "It's bigger than school recitals, and many people will attend. I think you should participate." A shiver ran down her spine. The thought of performing in front of a larger crowd was daunting. But she also felt a spark of excitement. She had grown from every performance, and this was another opportunity to push herself further. "I'll do it," she said, voice trembling slightly, but filled with determination. The next days were filled with intense preparation. The piece she had chosen for the concert was long and demanding, with intricate rhythms and emotional shifts that required both skill and focus. She spent hours at the piano, practicing each section slowly at first, then gradually increasing the speed until her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys. She recorded herself, listened carefully, and corrected any mistakes. Every evening, her hands ached, and her mind felt exhausted, but she welcomed the challenge. She knew that dedication was the key to mastery. During breaks at school, she noticed some students whispering and pointing. She felt a pang of frustration but refused to let it consume her. Instead, she focused on the music, letting it become a shield against doubt and negativity. She reminded herself of the recitals and contests she had already faced. She had overcome fear and embarrassment before, and she could do it again. The day of the community concert arrived. The hall was much larger than any she had performed in before, with rows of seats stretching far back and lights bright enough to make her squint. She walked backstage, taking in the scale of the event. The energy was different, heavier, more intimidating, but also full of possibility. She could hear the faint tuning of other instruments and the rustle of programs as the audience settled. The tension in the air was almost palpable. She waited, hands clasped together, listening to the performers before her. The applause for each act made her heart race. When it was finally her turn, she walked onto the stage with a steady pace, trying to calm her nerves. She saw hundreds of faces looking at her, some familiar, some strangers, but she focused on one thing: the piano. Sitting at the bench, she positioned her hands over the keys and took a deep breath. The first notes were quiet, tentative, but precise. She let herself feel the music, letting it guide her through each section. The audience's attention sharpened as they listened, and she felt the connection forming, a silent conversation between her fingers and their hearts. Every chord carried emotion. Every trill spoke of her dedication and love for the music. As she played, she noticed the room changing around her. The whispers, the doubtful looks, and the earlier smirks faded. The audience leaned in, captivated by the sound. The piece was challenging, with sudden shifts and demanding passages, but she felt her confidence growing with every measure. Her body moved naturally with the rhythm. Her eyes closed at times to feel the music more deeply. She was completely immersed, and the room responded to her presence. Halfway through the performance, a technical section approached that she had been nervous about. The notes were fast, requiring precision and agility. Her fingers moved quickly yet accurately, gliding over the keys with a fluidity that made the difficult passages seem effortless. She could feel the music carrying her, her earlier fears forgotten. The audience watched in awe, some mouths slightly open, some heads nodding in appreciation. She realized that they were experiencing the music just as she was feeling it. It was no longer a solo struggle. It was a shared experience. The final section approached, demanding both technical skill and emotional expression. She leaned into the piano, feeling every note, every pause, every dynamic shift. Her hands flew across the keys, but they never faltered. She could sense the energy of the audience, the way they were holding their breath, captivated by the sound she created. For the first time, she felt not just the music, but the room itself responding to her, as if the piano and the hall were alive with the notes she played. When the last chord rang out, she held it, letting it resonate fully before releasing her hands. The silence that followed was electric, a moment of awe before the audience erupted into applause. The sound was deafening, filling every corner of the hall. She looked up, seeing the faces of the crowd, some smiling broadly, some with tears in their eyes, all showing admiration. Even those who had tried to humiliate her before seemed impressed, unable to deny her talent. She stood and bowed, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy flooding through her. The applause continued, growing louder, and she realized that she had not only conquered her nerves, but had also connected with the audience in a way she had never experienced before. Her teacher, standing at the side of the stage, gave her a proud nod and a thumbs up. It was a small gesture, but it filled her with warmth and affirmation. Walking off the stage, she felt a sense of calm triumph. She had faced a larger audience, a more challenging piece, and the memory of past attempts to humiliate her, and she had emerged victorious. She realized that the fear, the doubt, and the jealousy of others could not overpower her passion and skill. She had transformed every challenge into strength, every moment of anxiety into focus, every whisper of doubt into motivation. Backstage, she packed her sheet music and collected her things, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. Some students approached, offering congratulations, and a few who had tried to undermine her before looked awkward but respectful. She smiled politely, not needing to say much. Her performance had spoken for itself. She had proven her ability, her dedication, and her courage, and that was enough. At home that evening, she returned to her piano, not to practice for another performance, but to play for herself. She allowed her fingers to wander freely across the keys, creating melodies that came from her heart. There was no pressure, no audience, no expectation, just her and the music. It was in these moments that she felt truly free, knowing that her talent was hers alone, untouchable by envy, doubt, or humiliation. As she closed the piano and prepared for bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the fear of being humiliated at the first recital to the triumph of the community concert, she had grown stronger, more confident, and more in tune with herself. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the ability to move forward despite it. She had discovered the power of resilience, focus, and belief in her own talent. And she knew, without a doubt, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she could face them with the same grace, determination, and love for music that had carried her this far. The weeks after the community concert were full of reflection and growth. She had played for a larger audience than ever before and had faced her fears head-on. The applause, the recognition, and the respect she had earned still lingered in her mind. She realized that music had become more than just a hobby or a skill. It was a way for her to connect with herself and with others, to express what words could not, and to overcome challenges that life presented. School life carried on, but she noticed a change in the atmosphere. Some students approached her with curiosity and admiration, eager to see how she would continue to perform. Others, who had once tried to humiliate her, now seemed hesitant, unsure how to interact with someone they had underestimated. She did not seek revenge or validation. Her focus was on the music, and she carried herself with quiet confidence, letting her actions speak for her. Her teacher suggested entering a regional music competition. It was known to be highly competitive, drawing talented students from all over the area. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The stakes were higher, the audience larger, and the pressure greater. But she also felt ready. She had faced fear before, had transformed nervousness into confidence, and had learned to trust herself and her abilities. This was another chance to challenge herself, to grow, and to share her music with others. She began preparing diligently. The piece for the competition was demanding, filled with fast passages, subtle dynamics, and emotional depth. She spent long hours at the piano, practicing slowly to ensure precision, then increasing speed to match the tempo required. Each practice session was intense, filled with focus and determination. Her fingers ached, her back grew tired from sitting long hours, and sometimes her mind wandered in doubt. But she always returned to the piano, reminded that her talent was worth the effort. During these preparations, she also faced reminders of the jealousy and doubt from peers. Some students whispered, some watched closely, and a few even tried subtle ways to discourage her. But she had learned to let such things slide past her. She focused on what mattered: her music, her growth, and her own journey. She discovered that the opinions of others could not dictate her confidence or diminish her skill. The day of the regional competition arrived. The hall was grand, with a polished stage, bright lights, and rows of seats stretching far back. She could feel the weight of the audience's gaze, the expectation of judges, and the energy of hundreds of people gathered for the same purpose. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had faced rooms like this before, but each one was unique, and each required focus, courage, and composure. Backstage, she waited while other participants performed. She could hear applause, laughter, and soft murmurs from the audience. Some of the students looked nervous, others confident. She reminded herself that nerves were normal, but preparation and determination were what would make the difference. She focused on the music, visualizing the notes, the rhythm, and the emotions she wanted to convey. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage with measured steps. Her heart pounded, but she held her head high. She sat at the piano, feeling the keys under her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined the music flowing through her, carrying her thoughts and feelings to the audience. She knew she could do this. She had prepared, she had practiced, and she had faced fear before. Now it was time to play. The first notes were soft, deliberate, and precise. She felt the energy of the audience as they listened intently. Her fingers moved naturally across the keys, guided by countless hours of practice and a deep connection to the music. Every chord, every pause, every dynamic shift was intentional. She became immersed in the piece, losing herself in the melody, the rhythm, and the emotional story she was telling. The audience responded. There was silence as they listened, captivated by her performance. Some leaned forward, some closed their eyes, and some nodded in appreciation. She felt a powerful connection forming between herself and everyone in the hall. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It was a bridge, linking her emotions to those of the listeners. Every fear and doubt she had faced earlier in life seemed to melt away as she played, replaced by focus, joy, and determination. Halfway through the piece, a particularly challenging section approached. The tempo increased, the rhythms became intricate, and the notes demanded both precision and emotion. She felt a brief surge of anxiety but reminded herself of the countless hours she had spent preparing. She took a deep breath, allowed herself to trust her fingers, and moved through the section with confidence. The audience watched, mesmerized, as she navigated the difficult passages with grace and skill. As she reached the final section, she poured all her energy into the performance. The music became an extension of herself, conveying everything she felt but could not say. Her hands moved swiftly yet delicately, her body swayed with the rhythm, and her heart beat in harmony with the melody. She was fully present, fully alive, and fully connected to the music and the audience. The final chord rang out, resonating through the hall. She held it, savoring the moment, before lifting her hands. The silence was brief, then replaced by a wave of applause that filled the room. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, and showing admiration for her talent and courage. Some students who had tried to undermine her in the past looked astonished. Others smiled with respect. She felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing she had faced the challenge and triumphed. Standing to take her bow, she felt a mixture of relief, joy, and gratitude. The judges nodded approvingly, the audience continued to applaud, and her teacher, standing to the side, gave her a proud smile. She had faced fear, doubt, and the potential for humiliation, and she had transformed those challenges into something beautiful. The music had spoken for her, conveying her dedication, talent, and courage more powerfully than words ever could. Backstage, she packed her things, feeling a sense of calm satisfaction. Some students approached to congratulate her. Others looked on quietly, perhaps reflecting on their own actions and attitudes. She acknowledged the congratulations politely, but her focus was inward, reflecting on what she had achieved and the journey she had traveled. That evening, at home, she returned to her piano, not to prepare for another competition, but to play for herself. She let her fingers explore the keys freely, improvising melodies, and expressing emotions without any expectation or pressure. The music was pure and freeing, a reminder of why she had begun this journey in the first place. She realized that her talent, her resilience, and her love for music had carried her through every challenge, and they would continue to guide her in the future. As she closed the piano and prepared for bed, she thought about the path she had walked. From the first recital where she faced humiliation, to contests and concerts where she proved herself, she had grown stronger, more confident, and more connected to her music. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. She knew that life would continue to present obstacles, challenges, and doubts. But she also knew that her passion, talent, and determination would help her overcome anything. In the quiet of her room, she smiled, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. She had faced fear, she had conquered doubt, and she had embraced her music fully. She understood now that every challenge, every moment of fear, and every attempt at humiliation had shaped her into someone stronger and more confident. She had discovered her own power, her own voice, and her own ability to rise above obstacles. And she knew that, no matter what lay ahead, she would continue to face the world with courage, grace, and the music that flowed through her, silencing every doubt and inspiring everyone who listened.